Go with your burning question.
This is kind of I have a couple of other questions, but the question that I'm most curious about is what your casting process was like for part 2. Did you bring back a lot of people who did voice acting for you for the first part? Did you do did you bring a lot of new people on? And I just wonder, were there any challenges? Like, which roles were more challenging to cast? Finnick, for example, was it hard to find, the perfect voice for Finnick, et cetera? And whoever wants to jump in can.
I can take that one.
Yeah, I can take this one. It was, we brought back as many of the people from the first part that could come back and that wanted to come back, which was actually most everybody. There were a few parts that we had to recast, but I think the new people do as good a job as the old people. So, and then as far as, and then we had, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we had about half the number of characters that we did in the first part. We had to take about half that many and have new characters. We had to cast a lot of new characters, basically. I think the total number of actors that we worked with is around 40 for part 2.
Wow.
Yeah. And I can't wait for everybody to hear Finnick. We've got a really great Finnick guy named Paul Packler, who is actually Barbra's brother, plays Finnick.
Does he look anything like Finnick, or does he just have the voice of Finnick?
That's just,
I'm not going to answer.
Here's what I'll say. Paul's a very attractive man. He could absolutely play Finnick. I just don't know if he just doesn't have that bronze look that Finnick has, or it's described as him having in the books. So I don't think he would ever get cast as Finnick, but that's not to say anything negative about Paul. And beyond all that, he's just an incredible actor. I went to acting school with him, as did Bryant, and we saw him. He was a couple years older than us, and we saw him do some really great work in college, and he'd continued doing a lot of good stuff. So it was sort of a no-brainer bringing him in, and he's become really passionate about the project too. And an interesting thing, actually, I'll get off this, but an interesting thing about Paul is he's our voice coach as well. So he came up with the capital dialect for us based on Suzanne Collins' notes. He worked with various actors on developing that and helping train them. So he's a very talented person. But and then everyone else, I guess the biggest challenge for us, for me at least, was finding Mags, actually, and sort of what exactly to do, because there's sort of a vagueness with, did she have I guess a lot of fans have sort of different opinions. Did she have a stroke or something, or does she have a really hardcore dialect? So we sort of played with that. I'm excited for everybody to hear what we've done with her too. Yeah,
that was actually going to be my next question, because reading Katniss's descriptions of Mag's speech in the book, like you said, it's all very vague, and it does sound like she may have had a stroke, or like you said, a lot of fans think she could be speaking some sort of a dialect, or possibly even Spanish if she is, maybe Mexican in origin, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because I can't imagine, in the film, what Lynn Cohen is going to sound like as Mag. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what your Mag sounds like.
I think we're keeping it as kind of and the other guys can disagree with me, but I think we're keeping it sort of an unofficial sort of secret what we're doing with Max. But let me just say we made some very distinct choices
okay,
with
cool.
her. So
I'm seriously looking forward to that. And then the other question that I just kind of want to ask you, and this is something I would think that our listeners would like to know as well, what kind of goes into the making of each episode? And I know that that's a very broad question, but, kind of what is the adaptation process like? Do you sit down with the book and start making notes, before you write your scripts? Do you record each episode individually? Do you record different bits at the same time? I just kind of want to know what your whole process is. If you're willing
why
to
don't we
share.
let Tony? sure. I think so. Tony is the head writer on this, and Tony and Bryant and myself wrote essentially every third episode each. Tony did the first, I did the second, Bryant did the third, and so on. But if you want, Tony, do you want to field the beginning part of the process, how we sort of start off?
Yeah. During the first season, we pretty much started writing, and we had long conversations about what we wanted to do. We wanted to have conversations about what we would do with Bet and Linnea, who would be our capital voices. And while they're mainly expository tools, they became characters in their own right. So we had to plan for that as well. As we went along, we chipped off every other episode. We'd write, another person would write it, and then we'd go into these meetings, and we would give notes to each other on our drafts. So each episode would go through 2 or 3 drafts minimum. When we got to doing Catching Fire here, we had a lot more time to prepare because of the lag time between 2 different movies. So we each took an episode, and we'd switch off every other episode. And that way, if someone wanted to do a specific episode, they could have that episode, to make their own. I always try to do the first and last episode because I love beginnings and endings. But then I work with such a great team here that everyone flavors every episode. So each episode may have one person's name on it, but it's a collaboration between all of us.
Right.
And another difference between the 2 ways that we approached it between part 1 and 2 is part 1 was very much done, as Tony said, we had a lot less time, so it was done almost like a television writing room process where in a Monday through Friday weekly schedule, we might be writing or finishing up the episode on Monday, and the episode might be getting the final things recorded a few days later, and then Sam would literally be editing as soon as possible so that we could keep up our schedule of going week to week and getting everything out before the film was out. With Catching Fire, again, like Tony said, we had a lot more time, so we planned it out, and we're now doing a process where we did all of the writing and focused completely on writing and wrote every single episode before moving on to the recording process. And then the focus became the recording, which Sam does the majority of, working as the director. He recorded everyone. I think he's just wrapping up a few stray recordings, but most of the recording was finished before he started editing, and the goal now is to be able to focus solely on editing, and each one of those processes takes months, five months each.
Yeah. Is there... I don't want you to give, they wouldn't really be spoilers because we all know what happens in Catching Fire, but I would love to know, just to give people something a little extra to look forward to, is there one episode that you all particularly love? Do you have a favorite episode of part 2?
Wow.
There's no specific episode that comes to mind that I love them all. It's hard, hard to choose your children. But I'll say that I had a lot of fun editing, and with the actors who are in it. There's the whole, at the end of the Victory Tour, right before they go back to District 12 for the final dinner, they're in the Capitol and the President's Mansion. And we had a lot of fun with that scene. We created some new Capitol characters, and it's sort of this montagey, dreamy feel of Katniss and Peeta moving through the party atmosphere, and I think that turned out better than I even imagined it. And I had a lot of fun editing it, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun for the listeners.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to probably the last episode of the series, episode 22, because we put so much work into writing it that I can't wait to hear it comes together, because if it comes together the way we hope it will, it's going to be a barn burner, and people are just going to be stunned and amazed and just have so much fun with all the surprises we throw into it.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the end episode too. I think that's going to be, I think Tony nailed that. It's going to be really exciting. And the other one that I wanted to mention briefly is I can't remember which number it ends up being in our lineup, but I really am looking forward to releasing the episode where Katniss and Peeta have their conversation on the beach in the arena. I just think it's going to be a very touching moment. So.
And I'll just close up by saying I don't know that I necessarily have a favorite episode, but I will say that the most challenging episode to record has been, and I'll try to be as non-spoilery as possible if anyone has not yet read Catching Fire, but the reading of the card and the aftermath of that for Katniss was rather challenging. So there was some emotion going on there.
Barb's just now getting her voice back.
Yes.
Oh, I love that you called, or I love that you referred to the final episode as a barn burner. I haven't heard that phrase in a while, and I really like it.
I love that.
Like our head writer.
Okay, Adam, do you have any questions that you would like to ask? And do any of our panelists have any questions they'd like to ask? Anyone, just pop in.
You know what? Let's go to the panelists, and then if there's time, I'll ask a question or two at the end. But I want to let other people have a chance to ask, not to put anyone on the spot or anything.
I am looking forward to you guys doing Mockingjay because that's my favorite.
Me too. Are you guys going to do Mockingjay? That was very presumptuous of you, Courtney.
I know.
Without giving anything away, I would say that listeners should tune in all the way throughout because we may or may not have a big announcement at the end of part 2.